Hi, and welcome to the fifth video in the PowerShell Beginner Project series. In this video, we will be covering number 5 out of the 8 beginner project ideas. So this one is going to be the one-off account creator. So on this channel, we've already made a script that automizes Active Directory based on a file from HR, but you might always have that situation where a volunteer might come in where they're not going to be part of your HR system, or you want to create a service account and maybe you want to standardize the way that service accounts are created, but definitely want to standardize the way that you create accounts for volunteers or different people that might not be part of your HR system, like contractors or third party companies that are helping you with your environment. So we're going to be covering that today. So the way that we're going to be doing this is we're going to be creating a PowerShell function that you'll be able to call to create that account. And then I'll kind of go over some extra things afterwards in how you would use this script in like a production environment. But you could definitely use it just the way that we'll be making it today. But I have some additional things that I've done in the past in a production environment to make this script actually a little bit more useful. It definitely goes out of the bounds of the PowerShell. There's a lot of things that kind of go into my example afterwards. But let's go ahead and let's get started. So the first thing, when we have a user account, we know we need a name, a username, and then the name kind of breaks into a given name, a surname, and then with the username, that's usually the SAM account name. And then you'll have the user principal. We're also going to want to have like the description for the account just to see like what it is, and probably the title to make sure like if it's a volunteer or a contractor or something. And then you basically have the password, which that kind of goes without saying pretty much. So we know that we definitely need to capture all this information as an input. So what we're going to first start to do here is actually just create a simple function that takes in a few parameters. So let's go ahead and let's just write a function here, and we're going to call it new one off AD user. We're just going to open and close curly brackets here. And then in here, we're going to put these square brackets and put in there commandlet binding to give it the commandlet options. And then add in a param to add the parameters. So now for the parameters, we already know that we need a given name and a surname. That's going to be number 1. And we definitely need those. So let's put those as mandatory parameters. I'm going to only take in a string for those. And I'm going to give that just first name for the given name. I find like the given name and surname, maybe for some people, it's a little bit just obscure to know what it actually means. So we're just going to have a first name and then mandatory. And we're going to have a string. And we're going to have a last name. I find like these are just a little bit more commonly used. And then what we also want is the reason or the description or the title that the person is. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting the title and the description as the same thing, but you don't necessarily need those. So I'm actually just going to put it as an optional parameter. And we're just going to put the string. It's just going to be reason. Actually, I will put this as a mandatory option. This is completely up to you if you want to make this mandatory or not. In this scenario, we will put it mandatory. We always want someone to give a reason for the creation of the account. And then we're also going to put in another parameter because we know that we need a mandatory. We know that we need a domain or a server that we're going to be putting this account on. So let's just put domain here, or let's actually put it server, because that's what the AD command let's usually use. So we're going to keep it the same. And then what we're also going to want to do, because these are one-off accounts, I usually want to put a expiration date on them. Now the expiration date is going to be completely optional, because if you're creating a service account, you probably don't want an expiration date. But if it's for a volunteer, you're probably going to ask for the days that they need access. And then by putting in that expiration date, you don't really have to worry. They're instantly going to be cut off access. So it's more of a security type of thing there. So we're going to put that as a date time. And we're going to put that as expiration date. And then the only two other things that we really need to specify here that we're missing is going to be the username and the password. So let's go ahead and let's put username after the last name, actually. I think like it makes more sense there. And for now, we're going to put the username as mandatory. And I might change that later down the line here, but let's start by putting it mandatory. We're going to put username here. And after the expiration date, we're going to put one more parameter. And for that, we're not going to give the option to put a password, but we're going to give a optional parameter as an integer for password length. So we can specify the length of the password that we want. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be storing that as a default of 15. So if someone doesn't specify a length that they want, it is going to be 15. So this is going to be all the parameters that we are going to start with for now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a try block in here with the curly brackets, and then a catch, and then curly brackets. And then in the catch, we're going to do what we typically do for functions. It's going to be write error $_exception.message to know what the error was inside of that try statement. So let's go ahead and let's first make sure that if we have an expiration date, let's make sure that that date is correct. So let's do if expiration date. So if we have an expiration date, let's go ahead and let's do a variable, and we're going to do get date, and we're going to do a date of expiration date. And then what we're going to do here is we're just going to do a write output of date. All right, so let's just make sure that this simple function actually works. So right now we are taking in a bunch of different options that are mandatory. We aren't doing a whole lot with them, but what we are doing is we are getting the date. So let's go ahead and let's just do new one-off AD user. The first name, we're just going to put that to test. Last name, we're just going to put that to test. Username, we're going to put that to test. Reason, we're going to put that to test as well. Server, we're going to put that to test as well. And then the expiration date, what we're going to be doing is we're going to give it a date of 2022, February 31st. So this date should actually give us an error message. So let's just run this code. And as you can see, we do get an error saying let me just bring this up so you guys can see it. So cannot process the argument transformation on parameter expiration date, cannot convert value 2022 to 31 to a system date time. String 22 to 31 was not recognized as a valid date time. So what we can do is if we change that to the 28th and we run that, we get Monday, February 28th, 2022, which is perfect. So that's the easiest way to test that, just to make sure that the date is correct. If someone supplies a incorrect date or invalid date, the system will pick that up and throw an error. So that is perfect. So let's go back into our function here. And then the next thing that we want to do, because we're already getting the first name, we're already getting the username, the last name, we're already getting the username. So that is perfect. So let's go ahead, and we're already getting the reason, we're already getting the server. So the next thing that we need to do is generate the password here. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a plain text password variable here. And we are going to make that equal to a randomized password. Now, in the past, I've had a video showing on PowerShell 5 that you're able to use the security web system type and generate a password that way. That is no longer available in PowerShell 6 or later. So I'm going to be showing you guys a different method to actually do that. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to make this equal to a dash join. And then we're going to do a parentheses and then an @ symbol and then another parentheses. So we have an array here. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing some ranges. So first one we're going to be doing is 0 in a single quotes, dot, dot, single quote, 9 single quote. So what this is going to do is if we actually just run this little line of code, as you can see, we get all the numbers 0 through 9 in a list there. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do a semicolon here, and we're going to go on to the next value. We're going to do a capital A in single quotes, dot, dot, single quotes, capital Z. And if we run this again, we're going to see that we get all the numbers 1 through 9, all the letters capital A through capital Z. So you're going to keep doing this for lowercase a, dot, dot, lowercase z, and then semicolon once again. Now that we've got all of our alphanumeric characters, now you're going to put in the special characters that you want. So let's put in an exclamation mark. Let's put in an @ symbol. What I like to do is I like to put in simple special characters that people know how to do. I don't like to pick very complicated ones. So here I'm putting in the exclamation mark, the @ symbol, the pound sign, the dollar sign. Let's do the %sign. And let's do the ampersand sign. And that should be pretty good. So if we actually run this here, we are going to get all the numbers 1 through 9, all the letters in capital and lowercase a through z, and then our exclamation mark, our @ symbol, the pound symbol, dollar sign, and %sign. Oh, I put that pound symbol in there twice. But I'm pretty sure I mentioned the ampersand symbol, but it doesn't seem like I put that in there. So let's put that in there. So we have all of our different characters that we want. Then what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to go ahead and pass this to a get random. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass a random, and then we're going to put in a parameter of count. And then we're going to put password length here. So what we're going to actually, to test it, let's just see if it works. So let's get random count of 5, and let's just run that line. I think I might have forgot to do something here. Yes. That is actually going to be in here. So make sure that your closing parentheses comes after the get random count 5. So you're going to have the dash join, open parentheses, the @ symbol, and then your array of characters, and then the pipe, and then the get random dash count 5, and then your closing parentheses. And then if you run that here, we're going to get a random 5 characters. And then if you keep running that, you just get a different 5 characters every time. And then if we change this to 10, we are going to see that we get 10 random characters. Now, of course, this won't always guarantee getting a special character in there. So you could definitely add some logic to this, but this is the most simple form of creating a very, very random password. So I would say, and you're making people change their password most likely on next logon. So I would definitely say that this is probably going to work to generate some pretty good random first passwords. So let's just change this 10 here to the password length. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call another variable called password. And we're going to make that equal to convert to secure string. And we're going to be passing in our string of plain text password as plain text. And we are going to force that conversion. And then what we're going to want to do is let's just go ahead and let's create our hash table of all the different properties that we want for our AD user. So let's call it AD user params. And we're going to make that equal to a hash table. And so that is going to be an @ symbol and then an open and close curly bracket here. So for the name, we're going to make the name of our user just equal to username. And then given name is going to be equal to the first name. Last name is going to be equal to the last name. Oops. Sorry, this is going to be the surname is going to be equal to last name. Sam account name is going to be equal to username. And then user principal name. In our case, it's going to be equal to username at jacked.ca. So this would be your email or your username at, and then your domain that you would have. So you could even put this really as server here. But the only thing is the server, you might not actually, your domain could actually be something like just jacked. But then your UPN or your user principal name would still be jacked.ca. So I'm putting that way. And then our description is going to be equal to our reason. And then our title is also going to be equal to reason in this case. We want the account to be enabled. So we're going to set that to true. The account password is going to be equal to password. And then the server is going to be equal to domain. Perfect. Now, as you've noticed, we haven't put that expiration date on there. And that's because the expiration date is completely optional. So if we don't have an expiration date, that's going to be just in another if statement down below. So let's go ahead and let's just do a write output here of the AD user params. And let's see what happens when we just pass in our command here. So the server doesn't seem, oops, that's because I set that to domain and it should be server. So let's just go run that again. So here we have our code. So here we have our enabled is true. Our account password is a secure string, so it won't show it to us. Our name is test. Our user principal name is test at jacked.ca, which is perfect. Surname is test. Title is test. Description is test. SAM account name is test. So let's go ahead and let's just put in some real values here. And let's put in the first name as jacked, last name as programmer here. Username, let's put that to progj, and then reason is going to be YouTube, and then the server is going to be jack.ca, and that should be perfect. Go ahead and let's run that here. So here's all of our values. Everything looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and let's start to code in some of the extra options here. So what we would want to do now is make sure that we also put in the expiration date if we have one. So here we're going to have if date. So if the date, because we've loaded the date variable up here, we're going to do an open and close curly brackets, and then an else with open and close curly brackets here as well. And then we're going to have new AD user. And then what we're going to have is we're going to have AD user params, and make sure that there's no $. It's just going to be the @ symbol, and then AD user params. To use a hash table in a commandlet, always reference it by the @ symbol and not the $. That is very important, or else you're going to have a lot of errors and you're not going to know where they're coming from. I've done it before. So the account expiration date, we're just going to pass in the date option here. And then for if there is no date, all we need to do is new AD user, AD params, AD user params. And then what we're going to do at the end here, we're going to do a write output. We're going to do user created for first name, last name with the username, and password is going to be plain text password. So now if we actually go ahead and run this here, we went ahead and we actually created our user. We've put an expiration date of 2022-2/28, which is actually already passed because it is April 5th today. So the user created for JackedProgrammer, which is the first and last name, with the username progj and password, and it gave us the randomized password in here. So if we go into my Active Directory in here, and we look in the users, we have progj here, we have YouTube as the description, we also have YouTube as the job title, so that is perfect. If we go into account, we will see that it expires on Sunday, February 27th, but it's end of. So when you put the date February 22nd, February 28th of 2022, the expiration date will actually show February 27th, because by default, the date that you put in there is instantly set to midnight. So the beginning of the day of February 28th is the same thing as the end of the day, February 27th. So what you might want to do is whenever someone gives you a date of the end, you might want to just add a day to that. But that is completely up to you. It kind of really depends on how the question is worded of when you want this user to be deactivated. If they give you the last day that they're working, then you're going to want to add a day. If they're giving you the day that they will no longer be there, so the day after they leave, then you can put in just that date exactly. So let's go ahead and let's just delete this user. And let's go ahead and let's specify our password length. So let's do a password length of 21. And we are going to see that we get a much longer password. So we know that our password length works. We know that our user creation works. So that is perfect. Now, there is one little problem with this, sort of, is if you're asking people for accounts, you're probably not always going to want to put in the username. You're probably going to want it to figure out the username on its own. So this is where I would change the username to just a optional parameter. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to create another function to generate a username. I find that this works better, especially if you're creating accounts for volunteers. You don't necessarily want to have to figure out what their username should be. You could load this function from our Automate AD video. It's going to be the same exact function. I'm just going to re-explain the process just so you guys can actually see it once again for the people that haven't watched those videos yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function and we're going to call it, let me just spell function correctly. We're going to call it new dash username. And we're going to do an open and close curly bracket here. And we are going to do a commandlet binding once again. And we are going to put in some parameters. Now the parameters for this are going to be very, very simple. They are going to be the first name, last name as mandatory, and then one last mandatory parameter, which is going to be the server. So once we have those, what we're going to want to do is we're just going to want to put our try catch statement here. And then in the catch, we are going to put what we always put in here, which is going to be the right error $_ dot exception dot message. And in the try, what we're going to want to do is one is people's first name and last name, depending on what area you're in, might have some spaces in there. They might have some dashes. They might have apostrophes. So what we're going to go ahead and do actually is we are going to go ahead and replace the we're just going to remove those characters altogether. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a regex, which is a regular expression, and we're going to put in the pattern here, and we are going to set the pattern equal to \s for a space, and then a pipe for an or, and then a dash, and then another or, and then a single quote. So that will get that will specify we're looking for spaces, dashes, and apostrophes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do an index equals, index equals 1 here. All right, and then what we're going to do is we are going to do a do while loop. So we're going to do a do and then curly brackets and then while. And then what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to while the get AD user filter Sam account name like username wrapped in single quotes here, and then the server, make that equal to server. All right, perfect. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say and username dash not like, and then you're going to put some double quotes in here, and you are going to put in the last name and first name. So what this is basically going to do this loop as long as we are not pulling until we don't pull any Active Directory users back from our domain and the username is not equal to the last name combined with the first name. So we're going to keep trying different usernames because our standardization for our server in this case is going to be the last name and then the first initial. So what we're going to do here in the do loop, we're going to set the username is going to be equal to last name. And then we're going to do an open and close variable wrapper, open and close parentheses. And then we're going to do first name dot substring 0 and then index. So it's going to start off just by grabbing the first letter of the first name. And then what we're going to do is we're going to also do a replace. And then we're going to do a pattern, comma, and then an empty string. So that is going to replace anything in that pattern with an empty string. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a index plus plus, which will auto increment that index by 1. Perfect. And then what we're going to do, so this is going to do that loop. So it's going to keep looping through till it doesn't find a username. So if it doesn't find a username and the username isn't equal to the full name, it will automatically break out of the loop. And then at the last case scenario, if it still finds a username, but the username is also like the first name and last name, it will automatically break out of that loop. So then what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be double checking to make sure it found a valid username. So we're going to be doing a if get -ad user. And we're going to be doing a filter. And we're going to be doing a SAM account name like, and then some single quotes here. And we're going to put in $username. And we're going to put the server of server. And we're going to be opening and closing the curly brackets here. And we're going to do a throw no usernames available for this account. And then we're going to do an else. And we are just going to go ahead and put username here. And we can put return username. Perfect. So then what we're going to want to do in our new one-off AD user is we are going to want to check if the username exists or not. So in this case, we're going to want to check if it doesn't exist. So we're going to do if -not username. So if the username does not exist, what we're going to do is we're going to do a username equals get new user. Oh, let's actually just run that function here so we can call it get new user. Oh, that's why it's not coming up. It is not a get, it is a new username. Then the first name, we're going to put in our first name. Last name, we're going to send in our last name. And the server, we are going to send in the server here. So that is going to be perfect. Everything should actually work great here now. So now we are not going to put in this username here. And let's actually just put in this name here. So Penny Cross, and we're going to have that. The server is going to be jacked.ca. We're going to have an expiration date of, let's say, April 30th. And the password length, we're just going to set that to 15, which is the default. So we don't actually need to put it in, but we're just going to put it in anyways. And let's go ahead and let's see if this works. All right, so the first user it created has cross P, so that makes sense. Cross, and then the first letter of the first name is P. And if we run that again, we're going to see that created the user called cross PE. Run that again, cross pen. Run that again, cross pen with 2 N's. And then it's cross penny. And then if we run it again, we're going to see that there are no usernames available for this account. So then we should see that it probably did not create an account here. Yes, it did not create an account, which is perfect. So we still got this here, which is not really what we wanted, which should have thrown an error here. But it threw the error here. Row error, and then what we're going to do is we're also going to row, and then we're going to throw the exception here as well. So now if we run this again, there you go. So we have no usernames is available for this account. So we just had to add the throw in the new username because it wasn't throwing the error message back up to the calling function. So as you can see here, and then we would actually be able to still do a username and then test user. If we ran this way, we do get an account created with the name Penny Cross, but the username is test user. We overrode the system by specifying a username in this way. So this is how you would create one-off accounts. Now, the way that I would probably use this is you could use it just like this, and whenever you get someone asking for an account, you run the commandlet with the properties that they give you, and then you give the manager or the person that requested the account, you give them the info that the script spit back out. Now, the other option is you could create a form of some sort or a website that lets the users request an account, and then it could go through some sort of approval process. And then once it gets approved, it goes into a database. And then you have the script automated, and it goes, reads from that database, and then creates the account. And then you would have a column in the database for it being processed or not. Now, this would be a much more advanced project. And it doesn't just involve PowerShell. You would have to code that web page in some sort of language, whether it would be Python backend or ASP.NET, or use a third party completely like Microsoft Forms, something that would let you collect data and put it somewhere. But this is how you would be able to use that in a production environment. That's something that I've done in the past. So that's really how you would create a one-off AD user. And like I said, that customized username just based on the first name and last name is definitely something extra. If you've watched my previous videos on automating AD, you probably had that idea to create the username dynamically instead of having someone input it. But there's definitely a lot of things that you can even add with this. You can also add if the user needs to change the password at logon, because if it's a service account, you're probably not going to want them to change the password at next logon. But what you can do here is just do another parameter So do a parameter and then make it completely optional once again. And then what I would do is I would just do change password at next logon, and I would set that default to true. This way, by default, it's always true. You don't really have to worry about it. And then in here in your hash table, you would just do change password at logon, and that would be equal to change password at next logon. And then if we do that here, actually by default, it'll already be true. So what we're going to do is test user 1. Let's just run that here. So we've created another user. So let's just go ahead and refresh this here. So we have our test user that we created at first, which did not have the change at next logon flag. So here we have that it's not checked. And then the new user, after putting that option in there, we have it that it is checked. So that is definitely something very, very useful to put in, especially if it's volunteers. You're probably not going to want them to remember that complex passwords. For service accounts, it's definitely could be valuable because you're probably going to be storing this password in some sort of password manager that you guys are using. So you don't necessarily always have to remember that password. So that's pretty much it for this project. This one was a little bit of a longer one as well. So in the next video, we will be looking at the account membership cloner. So if you guys want to give that a try before that video comes out, definitely feel free. I will be putting a link to the code to this. It will be in my GitHub as well. So take a look at that. And I'll also be putting a link to the Automate AD series if you guys want to take a look at that. It definitely goes a lot more in depth of managing the Active Directory through PowerShell that way. If you guys have any comments or questions, leave them down below. If you guys have any questions that you guys would like to see a video on, leave a comment down below. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell to be notified when the next video comes out. And I will see you guys on the next video.